Adana and Kyra were sisters who shared the same small apartment in the colorful city of Enugu. Though they grew up under one roof, their hearts were never truly the same. Adana believed in hard work and patience. She was the kind of person who woke up early, cleaned, helped neighbors, and dreamed of building a life through steady effort. Her laughter was quiet, her steps soft, and her words kind. Kyra, on the other hand, loved everything loud. She liked shiny clothes, expensive perfumes, and taking pictures in front of cars that weren't hers. She believed life was about being seen, not about building something real. Their late mother used to say, "Children may drink from the same river, but each carries different water in their calabash." That saying followed them into adulthood. When they both finished school, their paths divided even more. Adana searched for jobs every day, going from office to office with her brown file and hopeful smile. She waited in long lines, faced rejection, but never gave up. Kyra spent her time chasing parties, taking photos with influential people, and posting about a lifestyle she could barely afford. At night, Adana would sit by the window, counting her last coins, thinking of how to help with rent. Kyra would walk in late, perfume filling the room, laughing loudly about people she met and plans that never came true. They loved each other as sisters, but Kyra's words often stung like hidden thorns. She would look at Adana and say, "You think too small, sister. Dreams don't live in the hands of workers." Adana would smile quietly, not because she agreed, but because she knew time had its way of revealing truth. The city around them was alive, buses honking, street vendors shouting, and people rushing with their own stories. Adana moved through it with calm eyes, believing that even in chaos, peace could be found. Kyra moved through it like a flame, burning fast, never noticing what turned to ash behind her. Life was preparing both of them for a test they didn't yet see coming. Adana's gentle heart and quiet strength would one day become her power, while Kyra's pride would soon meet the kind of lesson that changes everything. After graduation, Adana spent months searching for a proper office job. She carried her resume everywhere, walking under the hot Enugu sun, knocking on company doors, waiting for calls that never came. Each morning she left home with hope, and each evening she returned with disappointment. Rent was due, bills were waiting, and Kyra's constant teasing made it worse. Her sister would laugh and say, "You studied so hard just to sit at home. Maybe you should try serving food since that's all that's left for you." Those words cut deep, but Adana stayed quiet. She knew silence could be stronger than anger. One day, while walking through the busy market area, she noticed a small sign that said "Help Wanted, Waitress Needed" at Taste of Home. The restaurant was small but filled with warmth. The smell of fresh jollof rice floated through the air. She hesitated for a moment, thinking of what Kyra would say, then stepped inside. The owner, Madame Ifioma, was a kind woman with tired eyes and a big smile. She asked, "Can you serve people with a cheerful heart?" Adana nodded softly. That day, her life quietly began to change. The first few weeks were hard. She had never carried trays before or cleaned tables after strangers. Her feet ached, her back hurt, but she refused to quit. The customers liked her because she served them with respect. Madame Ifioma noticed how serious and polite she was and began to teach her small things: how to manage orders, how to talk to suppliers, and how to keep accounts. Meanwhile, Kyra told everyone in their neighborhood, "My sister serves people for a living." She mocked her on social media, posting pictures of fancy restaurants saying, "Some of us dine here, some of us work there." But Adana didn't respond. She only smiled and went back to work every morning with quiet determination. As weeks turned into months, something unexpected happened. The restaurant started to get more customers. People came not only for the food but for the calm energy Adana brought. She greeted every guest with genuine warmth. Even when her hands were tired, her smile never faded. What started as a job born from desperation slowly became her purpose. She didn't know it yet, but that little restaurant would become the place where her destiny would rise. The job that everyone once mocked would soon become the dream that changed everything. Adana decided that silence was better than defending herself. When people laughed at her for being a waitress, she only smiled and kept serving. She understood that sometimes words are not needed. Actions speak louder. Every day at Taste of Home, she worked with her full heart. She arrived before sunrise to clean the tables, arrange chairs, and help the cooks prepare for the day. She learned how to balance trays, how to greet customers warmly, and how to stay calm when someone spoke rudely. Her hands were always busy, but her mind was quietly collecting lessons. She watched Madame Ifioma closely. The older woman handled the restaurant like a mother would handle her children, firm but loving. She knew how to make people feel welcome, even on bad days. Adana admired that. She started asking small questions: how to manage food stock, how to deal with suppliers, and how to plan a good menu. Madame Ifioma saw something rare in her. Not just obedience, but hunger to grow. She often said, "Child, your spirit is humble, but your strength is loud." In her free moments, Adana stood by the kitchen door, watching the cooks prepare dishes. She learned how to measure ingredients by sight, how to blend spices perfectly, and how to serve food that made people smile. She didn't dream of fame or luxury anymore. She just wanted to be good at what she did. Slowly, the customers began to notice her. They returned not only for the meals, but because they liked the peace she brought to the room. Her presence turned a simple restaurant into a place that felt like home. Madame Ifioma started trusting her with bigger responsibilities, handling money, training new staff, and even helping plan weekend events. Adana grew more confident, not with pride but with quiet gratitude. She no longer cared about what her sister or anyone else thought. She found peace in the sound of clinking plates and laughter around tables. What others saw as a small job, she now saw as a classroom for life. Through hard work, patience, and humility, Adana discovered something powerful. Success is not always loud. Sometimes, it grows quietly in the heart of those who serve with love. As weeks turned into months, Adana began to see the restaurant with new eyes. She looked around and realized that Taste of Home had great food but needed a fresh spirit. The walls were dull, the chairs were old, and the menu had not changed in years. With quiet confidence, she started making small improvements. She added colorful tablecloths, placed small flower pots by the windows, and taught the staff to greet every guest with a smile that felt genuine. Her small touches began to make a big difference. One day, she suggested to Madame Ifioma that they try adding a few modern dishes inspired by local recipes. "Let's keep the tradition but give it a little sparkle," she said softly. Together, they created a new menu that mixed classic Nigerian meals with creative twists: spicy yam chips, coconut rice bowls, and grilled fish served with fruit sauce. Customers were excited. Young people began to visit more often, posting pictures of the food online, and calling the place the hidden gem of Enugu. Adana's ideas didn't stop there. She repainted the restaurant in warm colors, added soft music in the evenings, and organized family Sundays, where children could eat for half price. Soon, Taste of Home was full every day. People came not only for the food but for the feeling of warmth that Adana brought to the space. Her name started to spread quietly around town. The kind waitress who made everyone feel valued. Madame Ifioma watched her with pride. She could see the restaurant shining in ways it never had before. She often told Adana, "You have turned this place into a garden. Everything you touch grows." Adana only smiled and kept working harder. She stayed late after closing hours, making sure everything was clean and ready for the next day. Outside the restaurant, life continued as usual, but inside, something magical was happening. Taste of Home was no longer just a small eatery. It had become a place filled with laughter, hope, and love, all planted by Adana's hands. What started as a simple job had grown into a living dream, proof that when passion and humility work together, even the smallest seed can grow into something beautiful. Kyra's life looked perfect from the outside. She had become a popular face on a lifestyle TV show, wearing expensive clothes and smiling confidently in front of cameras. People admired her beauty, her charm, and her boldness. She loved the attention and the flashing lights. Every evening, she posted pictures online, showing a life full of glamour. She often looked down on her sister, believing success was measured by fame and followers. She never imagined how fast all of it could disappear. One day, her world began to crumble. News broke that several of her sponsorship deals were fake. Brands she claimed to work with denied knowing her. The station received complaints, and soon her name became a topic of gossip. Viewers turned against her, calling her a fraud. The producers removed her from the show to protect their image. The same people who once praised her now pretended not to know her. The calls stopped coming. and the lights that once made her glow now felt cold and distant. At first, Kyra refused to accept the truth. She thought it was just bad luck, that things would soon return to normal. But days turned into weeks, and silence became her new reality. Her savings began to disappear quickly. The fancy clothes no longer brought her comfort. Even her closest friends stopped answering her calls. She realized that most of them were around her only for status, not love. For the first time in her life, she tasted loneliness. She sat in her small apartment, scrolling through her old pictures, remembering the days she mocked her sister. The laughter that once came so easily now felt heavy. She wished she had been kinder, that she had learned to respect people no matter their work. Regret began to fill her heart like slow rain. The pride she once wore like a crown had turned into a burden. She no longer had fans, only memories. And as she looked out of her window at the city lights fading into the night, she finally understood that fame without humility is as fragile as glass. It shines beautifully for a while, but once it cracks, it never looks the same again. The years passed, and Taste of Home continued to shine brighter every day. Under Adana's care, it became more than a restaurant. It became a safe space for people to eat, laugh, and feel loved. Madame Ifioma, who had once taught her everything, grew older and began to think about rest. One quiet evening after closing time, she called Adana to sit with her. The lights were dim, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. With gentle eyes she said, "My child, you have given this place new life. It's time it belongs to you." Adana froze, not believing what she heard. Her eyes filled with tears as Madame Ifioma handed her the ownership papers. It was a moment she would never forget. The moment her hard work turned into something beautiful and lasting. At first, Adana didn't know what to do. She had never imagined owning a business, but after a few sleepless nights, she decided to take the next step. She wanted to give the restaurant a fresh face that matched her story, strong, proud, and full of hope. She renamed it House of Ade, meaning House of Crown. She wanted every person who walked through those doors to feel royal, no matter who they were. She worked day and night to rebuild the space. She brought in local artists to paint the walls with bright African designs. The chairs were replaced with handmade furniture from village craftsmen. She introduced soft traditional music mixed with modern tunes, creating a feeling that was both old and new. Her menu blended traditional dishes with creative twists, suya wraps, coconut stew, and sweet plantain desserts that everyone loved. Soon the new restaurant opened, and people were amazed. The air was filled with joy and pride. Customers lined up outside, waiting to try the new experience. Adana walked around, greeting each guest with the same humble smile she had on her first day as a waitress. The journey from carrying trays to owning one of the most loved restaurants in Enugu felt unreal. Her heart was full of gratitude, not pride. She often whispered to herself, "This is what patience builds, a dream made from faith, not fame." The evening was calm, and House of Ade glowed under soft golden lights. The air smelled of grilled fish and warm spices. The restaurant was busy, filled with laughter and the sound of clinking glasses. Adana stood near the kitchen, watching her staff serve with pride. Everything felt peaceful until the door opened, and a familiar voice echoed through the room. It was Kyra. She walked in wearing a bright red dress, surrounded by her new colleagues, her laughter filling the space like old music Adana didn't want to hear. Kyra looked around, impressed by the beauty of the place. "Wow," she said loudly. "This restaurant is something else. I once knew a silly girl who worked in a small place just like this." Her words were sharp, covered in pride but empty on the inside. Adana froze for a second when she heard her sister's voice, but she quickly regained her calm. She didn't want her staff or the customers to notice anything unusual. Instead, she quietly continued checking orders while listening to the conversation from a distance. Kyra sat at a corner table, continuing to talk about herself, pretending everything in her life was still perfect. She laughed loudly, unaware of how close she was to the person she once mocked. The waiter serving her smiled and said politely, "Our owner will be joining the floor soon." Kyra smirked, not caring who the owner was. She looked around proudly, still carrying the same attitude that once pushed everyone away. A few minutes later, Adana stepped out from behind the counter, wearing her simple but elegant uniform with the Golden House of Ade logo on her chest. The staff turned respectfully and greeted her. "Good evening, madam." The whole room seemed to pause for a moment. Kyra's laughter faded mid-sentence as her eyes met Adana's. Her smile slowly disappeared, replaced by shock and silence. In that moment, the world felt still. Adana's heart ached, but she stood tall, her face calm and gentle. She didn't need to say a word. Every part of her presence spoke the truth Kyra once refused to see. The sister she had mocked was now the woman everyone respected. When Adana stepped out wearing her owner's uniform, the golden logo shining softly on her chest, the restaurant came alive with quiet respect. Her staff straightened up immediately, their voices warm as they said together, "Good evening, madam." The sound filled the air like a gentle wave. Every customer turned to look, admiring the calm woman who clearly led with grace. But at one corner table, one person froze completely. Kyra's smile vanished. The glass in her hand almost slipped. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she stared at her sister, unable to speak. For a few long seconds, time stood still. The same sister she once mocked for serving food was now being treated with admiration by everyone in the room. The realization hit her hard. The people she tried to impress for years were now admiring the very person she used to insult. Shame wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. Her heart pounded as she remembered every cruel thing she had ever said. Every laugh, every insult, every post that made fun of her sister's job. Adana walked gracefully through the restaurant, greeting guests, checking tables, making sure everything was perfect. When she reached Kyra's table, her eyes softened. She didn't show anger or pride. She only said politely, "Welcome to House of Ade. I hope you enjoy your meal." Her voice was calm, kind, and full of quiet power. Kyra tried to respond, but her lips trembled. The colleagues she came with looked confused. One of them whispered, "Wait, you said you knew someone who worked here?" Kyra couldn't answer. She sat there, fighting tears, while Adana continued managing the floor as if nothing had happened. Each moment felt heavier than the last. The woman she once called a servant with a tray had become the owner of one of the most respected restaurants in Enugu. And the truth was being served right in front of her. Not with anger or revenge, but with grace and strength. As she looked at her sister moving with confidence and kindness, Kyra finally understood that success was not about shining brighter than others, but about rising above pain with dignity. In that quiet restaurant, surrounded by people's admiration, Kyra tasted her first bite of true humility. Kyra sat frozen at the table, her hands trembling as she tried to hide her tears. The laughter that had once filled her voice was gone. She looked around and saw people greeting her sister with admiration, calling her madam, thanking her for the delicious meals. Every thank you cut through her pride like a knife. Her throat felt tight, and her chest heavy. Memories of her cruelty came rushing back. The jokes, the insults, the day she told Adana that being a waitress was shameful. Now she could barely lift her eyes to face her. Adana walked over to her table, her expression calm and kind. She didn't carry the pride of victory, she carried peace. Her voice was gentle when she said, "I hope the food is to your taste." Kyra couldn't hold it in any longer. Tears spilled down her face as she whispered, "I'm sorry, Adana. I didn't know. I didn't understand." Her voice shook with regret. The restaurant grew quiet as people watched the moment unfold. But Adana didn't scold her or look down on her. She simply gave a small smile and said softly, "Respect is the first dish every person must learn to serve." Those words hit deeper than any punishment could. Kyra covered her face, crying openly. Her heart broke not because she was embarrassed, but because she finally saw the truth. She realized that her sister's strength was never in her job, but in her humility. Adana's calmness felt like a mirror, showing Kyra who she had become, proud, empty, and lost. Adana gently placed her hand on Kyra's shoulder, showing that forgiveness was already there. "We all fall," she said, "but what matters is how we rise." Kyra nodded, unable to speak, her tears falling onto the tablecloth. The other diners turned away respectfully, touched by the quiet beauty of what they saw. For the first time in her life, Kyra felt small in the best way, not defeated but humbled. The walls she had built with pride slowly melted under her sister's kindness. And in that silent moment, filled with tears and forgiveness, two hearts that had drifted apart began to find their way back to each other. Adana looked at her sister and saw not the proud, careless girl from the past, but someone who had been broken enough to finally understand life. Her heart softened completely. Instead of turning away, She chose to lift her up. The next week, Adana called Kyra and offered her a position as the restaurant's event planner. At first, Kyra couldn't believe it. She didn't think she deserved such trust after all the pain she had caused. But Adana smiled and said, "You've learned, and that's enough. Let's start again as sisters." Kyra accepted with tears in her eyes. From that day, the restaurant began to change even more. Kyra brought her charm and creativity into event planning, turning birthdays, weddings, and family celebrations into unforgettable experiences. Adana continued to manage the kitchen and operations with her steady hands and calm heart. Together, they became a perfect team, the mix of heart and style that made House of Ade bloom brighter than ever. Their teamwork drew attention from all over the city. Newspapers wrote about two sisters who turned pain into purpose. People came not just for the food but for the story behind it. The restaurant became known as a place of second chances, where broken things could become beautiful again. Customers often said the air inside House of Ade felt different, warmer, filled with love and humility. Kyra grew deeply grateful. Every day she arrived early, greeting the staff with respect, remembering the lesson her sister had taught her, that no job is small when done with dignity. Adana, on the other hand, continued to guide her sister with patience and faith, proud of how far they had come. One evening, as they watched the restaurant full of smiling faces, Kyra turned to Adana and whispered, "You gave me back more than a job. You gave me myself." Adana smiled, resting her head on her sister's shoulder. From that moment, their story spread across Nigeria, not just as a tale of success, but of forgiveness, hard work, and grace. House of Ade became more than a restaurant. It became a symbol of what happens when love chooses mercy over pride, and when two hearts find their way back home. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to African Folktales. Your support helps us share more inspiring African stories every day. New stories uploaded daily, so make sure to turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss the next one.